Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to today's public webinar on effective economic mobility coaching practices for youth and young parents. We are so excited that you are all here and really excited about the conversation we're going to have with our amazing panelists in just a few moments. As you know, we like to give a minute or two to get folks in and settled. And then we will begin the conversation. While folks are doing that, I'm just going to give a little bit of background about what's happening today and how this topic came up and has been explored. The Youth and Young Parent Learning Project is a collaboration of Economic Mobility Pathways and a cohort of 6 youth-serving agencies that are members of the Exchange, plus the Exchange, who also does this work directly. And these organizations were selected because of their established work with youth experiencing poverty in their respective locales, as well as their existing success in implementing Empath's mobility mentoring model with young participants. The results of this learning project and all of the data that we got from these folks and others was summarized in a brief that is being released today, also from Empath. And Keneal will be dropping a link in the chat for that. And we're very excited about it. Thank you, Keneal. And so, first thing, we just want to say, please feel free to share that link widely with all of your networks. There's really good information in here from experts in the field and lots of strategies and tips for effectively working with youth that we'd love to share. We cannot possibly go through all of it today with only an hour, but we're going to try to hit the highlights and talk about some of the themes that came up with experts from the field. So, before we get started, just a couple of acknowledgements. Both the paper and this webinar are results from a huge collaborative effort, and we want to acknowledge all of the folks that made this happen, beginning with our generous funder, Annie E. Casey Foundation, so thank them. We also want to thank the Exchange member organizations who contributed both their time and their expertise to this project, including Children's Aid and Family Services in New Jersey, Fresh Start Women's Foundation, 18 Degrees, Onondaga County Department of Social Services, Nebraska Children's Home Society, and Western Dairyland Economic Opportunity Council. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank my co-researchers and authors of the brief, Jacob Fanning and Alyssa Hernandez. So without further ado, we're going to get started. First of all, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Natalie Vayu, and I am the Senior Director of the Exchange at Empath. That's part of the reason I'm moderating today. The other part is, prior to that role, I served as the Director of Parenting Education and Whole Families, the Opportunity Alliance in Portland, Maine, where we implemented mobility mentoring into many of our programs, including our youth serving ones. So this is a topic I'm passionate about and so excited about the information we've gathered to share with you all today. In addition, I would like to introduce our panelists today. First of all, we have Riley C., who works at Western Dairyland in Wisconsin. She's been working there for a year and is the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project Case Manager. Riley, does that all fit on a business card?
Yeah, very small writing.
Yeah, very small font, right? She works with 18 to 24-year-olds who are at risk of being homeless or who are currently homeless. Graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 2021 with a degree in Human Development, Family Studies, and a concentration in social work. Wow. When she's not at work, Riley enjoys hanging out with friends and family and spending time outside. Riley, thank you for being here. Next up, we have Diana Jones, who's a native of Omaha, Nebraska, and who has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Human and Social Service Administration and over 20 years of experience working with children, youth, and families. Areas of focus include early childhood education, family permanency, and adolescent development with at-risk youth. Diane, I think we can also include on there that you have a lot of experience implementing mobility mentoring with youth, right? And that's part of what you're going to be talking about today. Okay. And our final panelist today is Tisha Mender, who has 30 years of experience working with young adults who have aged out of foster care or are currently in placement. Started career at the Edison Job Corps Center as a counselor in a female dorm. Worked at Children's Aid and Family Services for the next 15 years and in a variety of roles, most recently as a supervisor of the agency's mobility programming for aging out of foster care, in which you implemented the mobility mentoring model. Just a note, Tisha recently transitioned into a new role in a new organization, and now is the senior program director at Roots and Wings Foundation. Congratulations to you, Tisha. And yeah, and okay, is everybody ready to start this conversation? Before we start, let me just share with folks listening that we will be offering some time at the end of our conversation for questions and answers. There is a Q&A box at below. So if, as we're talking, you come up with questions, feel free to put them in there. And we will, like I said, we will have a few moments at the end to answer questions. And in addition, if you have a specific question for Diana, Riley, or Tisha, they have all agreed that it is okay to be contacted directly to talk through questions that you might have that they have particular expertise in. So just wanted to offer that so folks can relax and enjoy the conversation, knowing there'll be ample opportunity for questions to be answered. Okay, Camille, I think we can go just to us and yeah, and let's start the conversation. So one of the things, there were themes that were found during this research about what it means to really be effective in the support and coaching for young adults, for youth and young parents. I meant to say this. I'm going to use the word youth to include both youth and young parents interchangeably, just to make it a little easier for our conversation. For folks, just so you know, the brief really goes in depth into some of the differences that these practitioners and others found between working with non-parenting youth and with parenting youth. We're not going to spend time on that today because we don't have enough, but just so you know, there's plenty of information about that in the brief. So starting off, one of the things that we've all chatted about before is that there really is a significant difference in working with youth than working with adults. And that being said, some of the research and feedback we've gotten from folks is that it can be difficult to engage youth in services like this. And so one of the first questions we'd love for you to share with us with all of your collective experience is, what strategies have you found to be effective to engage with the youth that you are serving?
Okay, I can start that off.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah.
So I would say more than anything is being genuine with your approach with this young individual, being very genuine, meeting them where they are and understanding that they are a youth and not an adult. So your terminology will have to be on their level. The way that you present yourself, carry yourself, even maybe the thing that you may be wearing has to be something that they can relate to. You have to be relatable in order to even have start a conversation with an individual who may be younger that you are working with.
That's great, Diana. Thank you for that. What else?
I think like everything you said, Diana, is so true. And I think it's like being genuine is so important because I feel like young people are really able to see through you. Like they're able to tell if you're telling the truth, if you're lying. They know right away if you're like a genuine person, you know. So if they think that you're not really there to build this relationship, they're not even going to spend, you know, any time or day trying to connect with you. And it's really, I think, you know, knowing what young people are facing in today's society, and, you know, we might not be the same age, but really trying to feel what they're feeling, you know, and just what they're going through, because the way young people are, what they're dealing with social media and all the different areas are different. So we have to like know and have that knowledge of what they're going through. And I think following through, like if you say you're going to do something, make sure you actually follow through with what you're saying you're going to do. And you might not know, you know, you might not know the answer, or you might not know how to do it, but being honest about that is really important. And just saying like, okay, I'm going to find out about this, and make sure you know, the next day when you said you were going to find out about it, you are doing that follow through. You know, it's just really important because they, you know, especially young people. I know my experience is working with young people in foster care. So it takes a lot of time to build that trust. So having ways to try to engage them, you know, is really important. And just knowing that it's going to take time to build that trust. Like it's not going to happen overnight. It's, you know, it could take months to build that trust, and showing, you know, every week you showing up for them, and if saying what you're going to do, and continuously making that attempt, you know, whether it's texting them or calling them, and not doing it, you know, and just being really persistent, I think, when working with young people. And I think it's also, you have to be like available at different times, you know, like trying to engage with them, because they might be sleeping in the morning. Like I'm up really early at 6 a.m. every morning having a cup of coffee. No one who's young is, unless they're going to school. You know, so I can't be texting them at 6 a.m. when I'm up, but like knowing, you know, depending how old they are, if they're in school, if they're working, like trying to be more flexible about their time and trying to connect and engage them, you know, when they're available, and like knowing what their schedule is.
I agree with what both Trish and Diana have been saying. Building that trust is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned from working here. Building the trust, and then showing them exactly what Trish just said. Like you're showing up, you're contacting them throughout the week, and some clients have told me that they really appreciate being checked in on, because they're like, no one has ever really done that for me before. So they're like, I actually really like when you check in and remind me, because then they're like, oh, I actually have something to do today, instead of just living their own lives. And they're like, no, I actually have to do my responsibilities and show up to these meetings, and really holding them accountable for me going to their meetings. And then what Trish was saying, making sure that you're following through with what you say you're doing, because they'll come back and be like, where's this information? And if you don't have it, they're like, why am I trusting you right now? But yeah.
I can also say, knowing what they prefer, as far as like, if you would prefer to meet in person, if you prefer to meet on FaceTime or Zoom, or, you know, making sure that they're comfortable with what they, with where you're meeting with them, as well as, you know, a lot of the younger population doesn't like to talk on the phone. So allowing text to be an option to communicate with them on a regular basis, and being direct with them, letting them know, hey, this is what this process looks like. I know you may not understand some of these steps, but this is what it looks like, and this is what we are going to do. And leaving room open for them to ask questions, and letting them know that they're safe. Like, this is a safe space for us to communicate. This is non-judgmental zone. You know, I don't have any feelings about you and where you are in this situation. I'm here to help you regardless of what's going on.
Yep, exactly. And I think sometimes it's also, you know, in the beginning with mobility mentoring, you know, we're supposed to be doing assessments and, working on goals, but I think it's also really important to kind of create moments like, Diana was saying, like, you want to know how they want to communicate, but maybe meeting them in other places, like doing things that they like or getting to know who they are will help build that relationship so you can engage them. Like if they really like something, bringing that up or meeting them, at some place local that has to do with that. And I think another big thing is really not taking things personally. So, like if they don't answer your phone call or they don't respond to your text, like, you have to keep being persistent, and it has really nothing to do with you. It has to do with certain things that they might be going through. So really like, just keep being persistent so you can become that person that, you can build this authentic relationship with them.
Yep. One last thing that I just thought of was just even remembering things like that's been going on in their lives and asking them about it is a
Yes.
big thing, because they're like, oh, you remembered that I said this one little snippet about what's going on, and you actually remember to ask me about it. I've learned is a big helpful tip.
Yeah, it
Okay.
sounds like, thank you all. This is really good information. It sounds like you're all saying in different ways that it's really about taking the time to get to know them as individuals and really prioritizing that relationship first, right? So they know that you care and that you can be trusted, and then moving in to the, to the bridge work and the thinking about goals. And I'm curious, as folks with a lot of experience, and this is not a question we talked about, so just if you feel like answering it, but I'm curious, what for you has been some of the, how do you know when a client's starting to trust you? What shifts, and how would other practitioners know that as they're doing this work?
I would say you will know that there's a shift when they start talking voluntarily. When they start talking and you don't have to even really ask the question, or you may ask a question and they just won't stop. Like they'll just ramble on and on and on. That's where you know that the comfort is definitely there and that they are trusting you and allowing you in their bubble.
That's great.
I agree, Diana. And with that, it's also like when you're texting, instead of me having to reach out all the time, they're just like sending me like their updates right away, and I'm not having to ask about it. And I'm like, yes, this is great.
Yeah, I think when they're excited that they actually accomplished a goal and they want to share that with you, it's great. But I know a lot of my work, I would have to go visit young people in their homes. And I think initially, family members or other people they're living with, or they didn't necessarily want me to come visit in their home. And, after a few months of that persistent and showing up, now you've become like, they know who you are. And I don't want to say you're a member of their family, but you've gotten to know the family members or who they're living with, and you're welcome to be part of their environment and their home setting. And I know that's made like a huge impact on me. Like once you're actually welcomed to be part of their life.
Such a good point. What about, so we've talked about, connecting with participants. What about connecting participants with each other? And, there's a lot of conversation now around the importance of social networks and building supports, peer supports. Would anybody like to share a little bit about how that is being intentionally thought about in your program design, or how are you hooking together participants so they have each other also as additional support?
So with our particular program, we work with young parents, and every other month we have what's called a parent-child social. And so we get with our families and they bring their children, and we'll have like an activity for them to do with their children. And then as a whole, everyone is able to mingle and get to know and see that they're not by themselves as a younger parent. And so we actually just had our graduation for the year on Friday, and they were able, all the little ones were able to run and hang out with each other and have fun and play tag with each other. And the parents were sitting there able to talk with one another and tell about their experience that they had while being in the program. So that's how we are doing it with our particular program.
That sounds like
That's
fun.
great.
Yeah.
We do something similar, or, when I was working in my other agency, we hold life skills or psycho ed groups. And we've also had like a teen mom support group that we would do with the young moms or the parenting moms that we worked with. And a lot of the times, like these groups, like we would have different life skill groups, which would have different topics such as, it could be like financial literacy. It could be someone coming to speak from Planned Parenthood, but allowing these groups to happen. And before COVID, they were all in person. So it just provided the young people a space where they were able to get to know other members, and just like kind of build, like you're going through a similar situation as I am. And just they were able to form these relationships that, I've seen, years later that they're still kind of texting each other and, trying to ask for childcare questions or help or assistance. So I think providing them opportunities where they can create relationships that might be like outside their family or their neighborhoods, and it's, people working on goals like they are, is really important. And I think even a lot of times we've lucked out like collaborating with other agencies that they would come and do these groups. And usually the people are so nice that they get to know the members or, the mentees that they're working with, and they can just build like their social network like that too, like getting to know, like, hey, this person's in the community and they can help with this. Maybe I can call them in the future about this. So that has been important. I think it's just, and I do know, depending, when you actually have a residential program, when you're living with someone, it creates a whole like relationship where the young children who are in this program are almost like siblings, and the moms that are living together, so that even creates like a different dynamic versus like not living with each other. And I know with COVID, it was harder. So we started doing things online and virtual and Zoom, which was good because at least you got to see people, but it's still it was different than when it's in person.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. There are definitely pros and cons, right? Thank you, Tisha.
In Wisconsin, we have the area that I work in, we have our youth action board. So it's for our age range, 18 to 24-year-olds, and just 2/3 of the group have to be in their definition, experience with homelessness. So they can come together and it's kind of a group where they get together and they try to figure ways to advocate for other youth, more resources, or they talk about what's been going on and how they can, essentially it was how my program got funded was through the youth action board.
Wow.
So they keep going with that and they find new ways on how to make our program more efficient for the youth in the area.
That's great, Riley. So that adds another dimension too, right? There's the peer connection, and also they're learning advocacy skills, and how to use their voice of their experience. Yeah, that's all wonderful example. I love how different all three examples are from each other too. It just shows the same idea being applied very differently depending on your population and your sector. Love it. Okay, this is good. We're doing great. Let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned themes at the beginning, and one of the themes that came up loud and clear, and you all have touched on it already a bit, but is really around the need for flexibility and the need for support, and that both of those things can look, I think you would say, different than when you're working with adults. And that, I know, I will just say, when we talked about youth that were parenting and youth that are not, there was still a lot of overlap here in our conversations around how do you, in a program, show flexibility, and at two levels: for the staff that are supporting participants that are youth or adolescent, and then also for the participants. So would love to hear some more about what does flexibility and support in youth serving programs look like from your experiences?
So I can start with that. I'll start with maybe staff first, like working with staff and how being flexible and offering that support to staff is really important. I know one thing which is good about mobility mentoring is that whole parallel process. So, while you're working with your mentees, you're also working with the coaches or your staff. And just, I think supervision is really key when working with coaches, the coaches, because, there could be a lot of transference of what's going on when they're working with their young people, and they could be feeling a lot of what the young person is feeling. So it's really important that staff has that time, and it's like a set time each week where they can like talk to, whether it's their supervisor or, if you have more than one coach, maybe it's a group meeting, and everyone is really able to kind of, I don't want to say vent, but able to like kind of share what they're going through, because I think we all need to process what we encounter every day and, how it's affecting us. So there needs to be a lot more time, to take care of your staff, to make sure they have that time. And I think it's really key, in this profession, like burnout can happen so easily and so quickly. So I think sometimes the supervisor needs to be aware of this, and just, a lot of times staff might not even know that this is kind of happening to them. So just, I think if you have that weekly supervision and that weekly time set for staff, you can kind of see how the coaches are doing and talking about that, and, trying to talk about self-care and making sure that no one is getting burnt out, because you really want to allow that time for themselves. And I think we keep talking about the whole flexibility, as a coach, you might be working later or earlier, or, handling a crisis in the evening or early in the morning. And you want to make sure that staff has time, like, okay, I need time now the next morning to kind of regroup and get myself together before having to start in again. So it's really, wanting to be able to recognize everything that the staff is going through. So like allowing the flex, even though we're expecting them to be flexible with the youth they're working with, like we have to be flexible with them also, so they're able to do their job at 100%.
Absolutely right. Without that, it's going to be very difficult for the mentors to be flexible or the coaches to be flexible with the participants if it's not baked into the design.
Right.
Good point. So how about those participants? I know you've all talked a bit about that, but what does support and flexibility look like for them?
I think that a lot of stuff has kind of been, when we were talking about how to engage, I think like being flexible is really important to know each person. So like really taking the time to get to know them in the beginning. So what they like and what they don't like, which kind of starts that way for you to build a relationship with them. Because once you know what they're interested in, people who maybe don't want to talk, they're going to start to open up more. Because you want to provide opportunities that you're really working on this relationship. Like I said before you dive into like goals and doing the bridges and all these assessments. And I think as a coach, we do need to be flexible with our time. So, it's not necessarily a 9 to 5 job. Like sometimes you might have to meet, if they're in school or they're at a job, you might have to meet them at 5:30, or, if they have children, like it depends when if they have to bring their child with them, or you have to meet them in the community because they can't get to you. You want to try to do things that are going to make it easier for them so they are able to communicate and it builds the relationship. I think also I think Diana had mentioned it too, like being like you kind of want to hold them accountable and like being honest with them. That flexibility, like the language, like the way you speak to them, and knowing like the adolescent development, like to have some kind of understanding where they might not show up for a meeting, they might not answer your text, but you cannot take it personally. So like that persistence that we were speaking about before, like you keep trying, like, okay, you weren't there today, but I'm coming next Monday at 5 o'clock, like just keep doing that and doing that in other professions, you might, like as a doctor, if you don't show up for your appointment, you're billed for it and there's no room for flexibility. But it's also really important, I guess, to have boundaries. So even though you want to be flexible with your time, you do want to set up those boundaries. So, you as a coach are not taken advantage of, and trying to help role model like what a healthy relationship is, because they might not have had experience of, what this relationship should be like. So being direct, I think someone had mentioned before. It's just really important to meet them where they're at, because every person that you work with is going to be like a different situation, and want to work on different things. So it has nothing to do with you as a coach. It's really taking the time to get to know them and meet them, where they are, and try to work on the things that they want to work on and focusing on their strengths. Because I do think mobility mentoring is very client driven and client centered. So it should really be, what they want to work on. And I think, I'm sorry, like I know, when they are not engaging, like you want to also take the time, like to keep giving them more opportunities so they can engage, so like that follow through and that follow up is really important.
Yeah, thank you, Tisha. You've all talked about that both in the cohort, right? And in the prep. It's following up, flexibility. It's interesting because there's the flexibility and then consistency, right? And they're both required to help strengthen that relationship. Diana, Riley, anything you want to add?
I would say, as far as like for the coaches, we call our coaches resource specialists. And I would say for them, like for my team, just sometimes for our meetings or our supervision, our one-on-one time, we meet in a meeting room out at the public library or at a coffee house, just to give them a different atmosphere to relax and be able to feel that they can, speak on some things, that sometimes you don't want to always be at the office, and that, there's other places, let's go get a coffee and let's talk about this. Let's have our supervision there. And sometimes I do that, it may be over food. And so just changing up things with your flexibility, with your team members, with your staff, just so that they can, a lot of times food helps you unwind. Food allows you to talk.
So true.
And I will say, as with being flexible, like Tisha said, it's not a 9 to 5. A lot of these individuals are going to school, and they are even having a job afterwards. So knowing that, we may have to squeeze in between just school and work or whatever the case may be, and just allowing them to tell you like, hey, I think I want to meet at the library today, and being okay with that and being flexible. Or is it okay if you come to the school and meet with me? If you can contact my counselor and ask them if it's okay if we can join my study hall, just knowing and understanding that everything won't be the same all of the time like we would expect with an adult.
Yeah, good points. Riley, do you mind sharing about your grocery store? Okay, you knew where I was going, didn't
Yeah.
you? Yes.
Yeah. So I totally agree with everything they're saying. I've learned for some of my clients, I've learned that I have tried to get like the basic, information about setting goals and all that. And I've learned that I'm like, they're not opening up to me. So I'm like, okay, we're going to a coffee shop and we're just talking about whatever you want to talk about to get you comfortable with me. And then I've learned that they're more willing to work on their goals after they've kind of just had that conversation where it's not like work. It's like easy talking, easy going. And I've learned that with the flexibility part is half the times my clients will text me and say, hey, can I just stop into the office quick? And I'm like, yep, like I got time. Or they'll be like, can you come meet me at the library? Like, I just want to check in with you quick. And they're reaching out to me, which is really great that I'm not always having to reach out to them. But what Natalie was saying was I take my clients grocery shopping a lot. It's just part of our funding. We help them before they get their food share and everything. So half the time my meetings are in the grocery store. We're walking around and getting groceries and I'm talking to them, but that's also, I've learned a good way to do it is because they're not just sitting down and doing a formal meeting. They're walking and distracted by food, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll answer my question. Or they'll be like,
Love that.
they'll think like with budgeting and all this stuff, they'll think about like, well, what would you make with like this or this? And I'm like, that it's a learning experience for both of us. Yeah.
That's actually great because you're not like face to face staring
Yes.
at them, you know, so like they can talk freer probably just next to you and
Yep.
walking. So
And sometimes I
that's
prefer that just as much as to walk next to someone and
right.
have a conversation rather than just sit and be formal. And
Right.
sometimes it makes me uncomfortable. So
Right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Riley. And I love the distinction I think that you and some of your colleagues made during our sessions together was, you know, those informal spaces and places are really good for relationship building. And then you said when you're ready to do the bridge and really do those strengths, strengths and needs assessment and goal setting, you do sometimes move back into the office. And that's also a really nice way for the participant to go, okay, we're making a shift, but they're doing it with trust, right? Because you have the relationship. Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Okay, that was a lovely segue into goal setting, which is as you all know, and many of our audience knows, is that goal setting is a huge component of the mobility mentoring model. And so we wanted to spend a few minutes with you folks as the youth experts to talk about goal setting with youth and what that looks like. What does it look like? How might it be different? What would be important for folks who are thinking about doing youth serving programming or improving theirs? What do they need to know?
So I would say with my program in particular, it looks different because a lot of our particular participants are 26 and under. And so a lot of the times, and they are parents. So a lot of the goals that they make are right here, right now goals, and they are a lot of times targeted towards their children on, what can I do to make sure that my child is okay right here, right now. And also with the goal setting piece of it. So I do all the intakes for my particular program. And during that intake, a lot of times if they're with the state of Nebraska, you have to be 19 to be an adult. So a lot of times we have the parents at the intake because they have to sign the paperwork. So one of my biggest things is that I ask the parent in front of the youth that I will be working with, what do they feel that a strength is from their child? What do they see? What strengths do they see? Because a lot of times these youth, they can't tell you a strength because they haven't thought about that. Or they've been in situations where no one has told them that, hey, I see this in you, or I see that in you, or they just don't think about a strength because they've been through so much trauma. And so I want them to see that, hey, you do have strengths. And when that parent or guardian gives them that strength and tells them, hey, I see this in you, you are very loyal, or you're this, or you're that, and they light up, and it gives them an opportunity just to take that in because they haven't heard many positive things with their particular situation that they are in. And then I ask them, I give them a few minutes to take that in. And then I say, so what do you think that a strength is that you have? And so then they'll tell me a strength. So I'll pass that on to our specialists so that when that time comes for the goal setting and that piece comes up asking what is a strength that they have that'll contribute to that goal, our specialist will say, hey, well, it looks like that your guardian said that you possess this, this, and this, and you felt that you have this. How do you think that will go towards that particular goal? And so it's been mind-blowing just to see how that has helped a lot of our youth just to keep going and give them that and that push. Like, okay, I can do this. I can set this goal and make it and continue to do right by myself and by my child.
Great. Love that.
I would say, like Diana, we work with like young adults, like, 18 to 24 and younger, and mostly have been in foster care, and some are parents or non-parents. But it's also very like short, like crisis oriented type of goals. And a lot of times just meeting, whether it's goals for their dependents or like making sure they have housing, making sure like the crisis issues are being met. So sometimes it's been harder to do long-term goals because they're dealing with like just immediate crisis and trying to figure out, how to handle that and to be safe with that. And I think a lot of times too, we've done like a lot of the goals they might have are so big and so broad. So we've worked hard to like, okay, let's make it smaller, so let's break it down into steps, or like, you want to go to a 4-year college, but let's maybe do a trade, or let's just, go visit a school first, or like just make them really something that's attainable. So that way, when they accomplish it, they feel good about it. Because I think if it's too big of a goal and they're not able to accomplish it, it just kind of helps them, not feel positive about the whole process of making goals and trying to accomplish them. So we try to do a lot with maybe just building their confidence so they are able to like achieve the goals that they set for themselves. And I think a lot of the youth I have worked with, because they're just always in crisis mode, they're not really looking long term. They're looking, I just want to make money right now. I need money to pay my rent. They're not thinking like 5 years from now, if I did go to school or if I did do this, I might have a higher salary versus like living paycheck to paycheck. So that has to, I think, a lot with the goal setting, just that they want immediate, I don't want to say immediate gratification because that's not the word, but like, they just want to make as much money
Oh,
as they
yeah.
can, like,
Mhm.
because they need it right now to make sure they can pay daycare or food for their child. So it's just like immediate versus like thinking long term.
Yeah.
So sometimes like, it's fun to have them think about, where they vision themselves, and do that dreaming and vision planning. Some people buy into it and some people don't, but just so you're not thinking all the time about like crisis and, how are you going to survive this month and pay this month's rent, like trying to get them to think more long term. But it is very crisis oriented in like those short term type of goals.
Yeah. That makes sense, Tisha. Thank you.
And I think another thing, and I'm sorry, is having lots of plans, because whatever they're like having like plan, like I am always like, all right, this might not work. What's plan B in case this doesn't work? Because
Mhm.
a lot of times they have a lot of setbacks and obstacles that they might encounter and face, that might not even have anything to do with them, but like just having another plan because it might not work out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the points that I have, Tisha very much covered. But I've learned that when clients come in and they have most of my clients' goals are to have the permanent housing. And I'm like, okay, this is your goal. And then I start breaking it down and saying, okay, well, do we have any income? Do we have this? And they're like, no. And they realize how overwhelming it is to look at the
Mhm.
more long-term big goals. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we need to get you to this point? And we'll do multiple goal sheets throughout the whole time I've worked with them. They will start with little goals, and then after a few months of working with them, we're kind of at like a low point, and I'll pull up the goal sheet and I'm saying, look at everything that you just accomplished. And they're like, oh wow. They
Mhm.
honestly feel like they haven't done anything, and I'm like, no, you've done so much for the past how many months that we worked together. And then they get very excited and like, Caleb, what's next? Like, they see that they can do it, so they're very much more motivated than having those short-term goals. And then they're like, oh, I'm this much closer to getting to the big goal.
Great.
Yeah, I love that. I love that's one of the things I really appreciate about mobility mentoring is that the tools really help folks be able to see and experience progress, right? And change over time. And that's so important, especially for developing brains who may not have experienced that process of setting a goal and achieving it, and then setting another one. So that I love that, Riley. That's great. Okay, I knew this was going to happen. I think I shared this, but the hour was going to move along very quickly. We have one more question that I think is an important one for the attendees. Again, utilizing your expertise. So some of the folks that are listening are probably thinking about their own youth programming or wanting to increase or start theirs. And our question is around, you know, you've all talked a lot about relationship building and how important that is working with youth. So what would you say are some of the important characteristics that, you know, that help a person to be really effective coaching a young person? From your personal experience and from working with your colleagues, what would you say are some helpful characteristics or qualities of a coach?
I think, and a lot of them we've kind of spoken about, so, you know, it is repetitive, but I think, you know, obviously being flexible is one of, like, you know, you need a person who's a flexible person, and is willing to, like, handle, like, if they cancel appointments on you, if they test your boundaries, or they, you know, they're going to be testing you out in the beginning to see what they can get away with. You know, I know we talked about, like, authenticity and genuineness. I think young people can really, you know, they can read if you are that way. So, like, you know, in working, you want to hire people that can really work with young people and really have, like, an understanding of how, like, executive functioning and the adult brain works, because, you know, depending how they handle stress is going to affect how, you know, they're able to achieve goals or not achieve goals. And I think it's also important, like, for when people need to be aware of what triggers them, because a lot of times, like, you as a coach, if certain things bother you, you know, not like that shouldn't be involved in that coach and mentee relationship. So, like, people, like, as you know, when hiring staff, you need to, like, kind of really get into that person and, like, try to see who they are and if they're capable of working with young people, because not everyone is. It's a, you know, a set population. And I think we spoke about it when we met, like, people really need to be passionate and really love working with teenagers and adolescents and young adults. And, you know, having that persistence and consistency and a non-judgmental person, being able to understand it could take months to build a relationship where they're talking to you, like Riley mentioned, and having to do those type of things, like going to a grocery store and not just sitting in an office, you know, like, that's working with a young person is not going to be the same as working with an adult. And I think having, like, humor, like, not being such a serious person and, like, being lighthearted, and not that you have to be fun, because we might not be fun the way a 19-year-old is fun, but just, like, not taking everything so seriously, but I guess seriously enough to hold them accountable, and not let them take advantage of you. But, you know, I think it's just really important to, you know, I guess it's, you know, sometimes it's to try to see those characteristics in people, like, when they're working with young adults. I don't know.
Tisha said a mouthful. She said just about everything. But I would add, just as their personality, just like they have the strong foundation in knowing themselves so that they don't take things personally. That's really, really big. Just knowing that and making sure that they don't take things home with them. And that is to leave it, you know, at the office. I encourage my staff to turn their phones off. So that's, you know, when their time is done for the day. I would also say, you know, and some places may allow this and some jobs may not, but, you know, you working with this population, they don't want to work with a person who looks like a social worker when they come to see them. They don't want, like, they will close up on you if you are dressed in a suit and tie or whatever the case is. Dressing down is extremely important. And a lot of people may not think about that. Like, I'm at work. This is how we dress at work. But dressing down, throwing on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt really can take you very far with these individuals, because you're not looking like an authority figure to them. You're looking like they are looking. So that's a very, very important piece to helping them be comfortable when working with them and being with them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Diana. Thank you. That's important. Riley, what would you add?
They just hit everything on the head. But I guess the word that comes to my mind is just be very easygoing. Honestly, crack a joke every once in a while.
Mhm.
Make it known that yes, we're here to do a specific job, but we're also here to build your trust. And building your trust can be funny sometimes. So that's my main thing is I will say random things sometimes and they'll just like look at me and then I'll start laughing and then they'll start laughing and they're like, oh, okay. And then my clients will come in and just start jabbing about their weekend and everything. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, sounds good. That's my take. And also with the dressing down, like yeah, that's my thing. I very much agree with the dressing down. It just shows that we're human just like them. Like we're not trying to scare you off with everything that has to be done. We're here to help and yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah.
I would add also, and it kind of goes with the flexibility part, is that you also have to understand and know, just as an individual, that each of your participants that you are working with are not the same person. So you have to be a chameleon, basically. So you will have to bring a different person to each meeting that you have with them, because you're going to have to fit their particular needs and be that person that they need in order for them to open up. So you can't be the same person to everyone that you work with. You have to be something different for each of those personalities, because you're working with different personalities. So you have to be somebody different, genuinely, but you have to be something different every time.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that was a great point. I like the way you said that.
I like that. You have to be a chameleon.
Yeah. Yes. Should that be on a job posting? Must be chameleon. Oh, this is so good. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I think we have time for oh no, we did have one more, didn't we? I think this is important and I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A so far. So if you do have one, we might be able to squeeze it in. So please feel free to type in, but we did have one more thing that we talked a bit about and just wanted to share with our attendees today. What about, do you need a degree in social service, social work, social services, human development for this? What about lived experience? What are your thoughts? What experiences with this?
Well, I think, a degree, I guess, can be helpful, for certain things. But I think having lived experience, depending on your population that you're working with, because I think all three of us are similar populations, but a little different, can be really helpful, because sometimes, lived experience can validate the person that they're working with in a different way than like a normal social worker is just coming at them and they're, trying to set goals, versus someone who's lived what they've lived. It does foster a different relationship. Like they might open up more easily to that person with lived experience sooner than like maybe a person that doesn't have that lived experience that has to work to build that trust. There's like a different level of empathy, because, this person has gone through what they've gone through. And sometimes it can provide certain levels of hope, like seeing someone who's like me, maybe they look like me, or they've been through something that I've been through. And here they are, wow, look, they have a full-time job, or they maybe did go to school or maybe didn't go to school, but they're able to live on their own in their own house or apartment. That can be like a good role model or a positive role model for the young people that you're working with. So, I think it does help, like maybe having both, but I don't think it's detrimental if someone doesn't have that like degree behind their name. It's more helpful for the coach if they don't have that degree, that they have someone like as a supervisor to process what they're going through. But I think the experience for the young person can just be as wonderful and beneficial having like someone with lived experience.
Thank you for that, Tisha. Any other thoughts?
I would say, a degree is always helpful in everything, but that doesn't necessarily give the experience. And it doesn't even have to be technically living experience. It can be prior experience in another position that they've had. And so I think that that is very important, just to have some type of experience working with youth or individuals who are younger. Because a lot of times if you are a younger person and you come working with someone younger, you have to be able to separate that. Like, they may be your peer because you guys are close in age, but you have to be able to understand and know like how to work with someone who is a peer to you.
Again, really good points.
It's hard to go third, isn't it,
Yeah.
right?
I agree with the degree. It's very much, it's an added bonus, I feel like. And then if you didn't have one, having that supervisor to help guide you through specific things. For lived experience, for me, if you don't have the lived experience, just find some way to relate to them. Somehow, some way, we are able to relate to someone, and that is how you can really build their trust, because they're like, oh, well, they're in this place and they went through the same thing I did. So it shows like I will be able to get out of this. It just takes time.
Those are great. Okay, we did have a couple of questions come in and they're all good. So let's try to do maybe one person answer each question, see how many we can get through. How does that in 4 minutes? So I know we talked a little bit about this, but maybe some more specifics around one of the questions was, how as a practitioner or a supervisor do you recognize and manage burnout? So would somebody like to talk? I know it was discussed, but is there any specific advice you would offer there?
I can jump in I'll try to say it really fast. I know, and working with the young people that I was supervising, and just hearing what they're doing each week, you can kind of hear it in their voice, like, oh, I met this one late and we were here. And so it just making sure that they use their time. Like if your agency offers flex time, or if they offer, you know, I know Diana said like going different places, but I really try to encourage staff to like, okay, if you work 12 hours today, like you're leaving early tomorrow or you're leaving early Friday, like you have to really make sure people use that, because I think as coaches or you know, mentors, they want to like give 100%, and you have to just make sure that, you know, your staff is really filling up their own bottle, because it's just so easy to get burnt out. So it's really just making sure, and you know, it took years of this, I'm not saying, but like as a supervisor, you want to just make sure your staff is doing that, because I think it's easy for us to see when people are starting to get overwhelmed, and what we can do to try to help prevent them. And using vacation days, mental health days, all of that.
Yes. Okay. One, there's more. So I just want to make just remind attendees that you are all welcome, open to being contacted. And if people have more specific questions, but here's a good kind of closing one. Any topics or questions that you found are helpful in getting participants to open up, like things that you know, can register as a kind of an opener to deeper conversations? Anything you'd offer there?
I would say really quickly, if sports, you start off talking about sports, or if they like dance, or I mean, you can dig into if there's a particular rapper that they like, what they like about them, or singer, whatever the case, like go into those little personal things. And if you know something about it, and this is a young person, they were like, oh, you know that stuff. Oh, and so they might start talking to you about, hey, you know, like, oh my gosh, that, oh, so you know this and that. And you be like, yeah. And, you know, so that a lot of times when they see that you may be older, but you're younger too. So that you can relate in other ways. So I would say that would be something to get them going.
That's great. Thank you. I think we need to end there, so I can get 2 reminders out and we can still get folks off at 4. But I want to say thank you so much to all 3 of you. And this has been a wonderful conversation. I think we could keep going. There's a lot more to talk about, but a couple of quick reminders that all of these types of conversations, there's a lot more of that information summarized in the brief. And so, so I'll have, if Keneal, if you can drop that link to the brief in the chat. I know you're doing a lot of things. That would be great. So folks can take a look and share. And also, if you're interested in more conversations like this and many others, a quick reminder that our Disrupting Poverty Conference is coming up on March 27th and 28th. And then the 2 days before that is actually our convening for folks that are already members. We would love to have you in Boston. We have a great time. We're having a lot to celebrate this year. So hope to have you there. And I just want to say again, a thank you to all of our attendees for being here today, and a very warm thank you to our panelists. And thank you for doing the really good work you do and being such advocates for young folks, because boy, don't they deserve it. So thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.